All right. Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Digital Marketing Agency Builders podcast. Today I have with me Shanice Miller. Shanice is a business productivity consultant specializing in project management who helps clients ranging from small startups to multi-million-dollar businesses save hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars. Her passion for identifying and solving inefficiencies began when she sold her first business, an educational consultancy that had been recognized in Forbes and BET at a less than premium price point because she didn't have her systems and processes streamlined and documented. Over the last 10 years, Shanice has used her ability to identify operational inefficiencies and create solutions to not only help save her clients' businesses, but to also help them fall in love with them again. Shanice, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tyler.
Well, I'm just going to dive right into the questions. Today, we're talking all about organization and operations of businesses. And I'm really excited to dive into this with you. But why don't we a little bit start on your background? So can you just kind of tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and the things that have helped, shape who you've become today?
Yeah, so I run a business operations firm for agency owners. And these agency owners usually have messy or no systems in place. And what I do is to help make their daily activities more efficient and their businesses to run smoother so they can really maximize their impact. And what really shaped me was I had to learn about systems the hard way. I'm sure a lot of us do.
A lot of us, yes.
You probably have your own story about how you learned it the hard way too, but I learned it from having my first business as an educational consultant. And I was, as you always say, that one-man band. I was doing the Facebook ads. I was doing the sales calls, and I was doing the client work, doing the marketing. I don't know why I didn't hire. I probably should have taken your program and talked about and had consultants, people that were working in that field, being able to do contract work to take off some of that off my plate. And actually, I did try to hire. I'll get into that a little bit later on. But just being that one-man band really just tired me out. It really, really wore me out. And it was to the point where I was making the biggest impact. I was just about to hit my biggest month in business since I started the business. So it seemed like things were going really on the up and up. But I was feeling so drained, so tired. I did not know how I was going to be able to maintain this level of clients and success next month, the month after that, or even the year after that. So I decided, instead of just shutting down my business, to sell my business. And that's when I went to sell the business and going through that process and hearing people's questions and their feedback on my business, I learned that they wanted systems. Everyone who wanted to purchase a business that was already in place, they wanted something they can come in, and maybe the owner was only working 5 to 10 hours a week. And the only way you were able to do that was through having those systems and processes in place so that you can plug in one contractor or one owner for another person, and the business would still run smoothly without someone having to be that talking head, telling everyone where to go, what to do. And that's what I had in my educational business, which was I was that person with my one-man band, always having to tell myself where to go, what to do, what do we need to do next, what do we do before these steps.
Yeah, you quickly reached that point, I think a lot faster than many of us think we're going to when you're growing, of just maxing out, your own capabilities, your own, bandwidth.
You do.
I know I surely did.
Yeah, especially when you take a course and that course really helps you with getting clients. But the gap in a lot of courses was where they don't really talk about setting up systems. So you're getting all these clients, you're excited now. You said systems can go onto the back burner. But like you said, you max out quickly.
Quickly. Yeah. And you're like, for me, I maxed out and I was just at like 5 or 6 clients because I was doing the fulfillment for them. Mm-hmm. I was trying to maintain some form of lead gen for my agency and getting people in. I was doing the sales for my agency as well. And I realized that when the fulfillment started taking up all my time, the business itself, my agency, was being harmed because I'm not able to put, all my effort into the front end, growing it and bringing in more clients. Right. And I think as a leader of an agency, you should first and foremost, have these systems and processes in place so that your fulfillment is producing really, really well, because you have to keep your clients happy first. But once those are in place, your attention really needs to move to the front of the ship so that you can drive it forward, so that you can grow, so that you can, basically stress test those systems so that you can continue to, grow. But you can't even start thinking about that. You're totally not on the front end of the ship when you're, knee deep in fulfillment. So getting out of that and getting those systems in place, I think, is just huge. And if you can, the sooner you can learn to do it, if you can learn to do it before you get trapped and breaking, the better. But I think a lot of us end up the other way, like I'm saying, breaking first. Many ignore the back-end operations of their business, and you focus on it. So why do you think the back end is so important?
I think it goes right into what you just said. As an owner of the business, you have to be at the front of the ship. And focusing on the back end helps you to become at the front of the ship. And what I mean by that is if you have those processes in place, if you have those back-end systems in place, then you can rest easy knowing that you have equipped your contractors or your new hires with the tools and the information that they need to complete the project on time and correctly with the same level of quality that you can give them. And just for example, and I'm sure you've gone into this, had the same issue, where you're getting caught up in the client delivery area. And I see so many of my clients in that same boat where they're doing all this client delivery, but that is not the best use of your time, and then when you're doing all the client delivery, the marketing starts to lax or the sales start to lax. So now it's this cycle of trying to get in there, but you don't want to really let go of that area. But having the back end ops, having those steps written down, step by step, what do you need to do so that you can hand it over to someone else? Now you no longer have to be in there. I actually have a client and I'm still working with that person to get out of the business, and they have a 7-figure agency, but they are still trying to be in all of the client detail, all of the client work. And I'm, working with them to tell them, okay, well, you're trying to be in all of the client work. I understand you want that high quality. I understand that you want your, opinions and your input to be in there, but now your schedule is so tight. We're not able to find, room in your schedule for you to be in all of these meetings. You have 3 meetings booked on top of each other. How are you, there's no possibility for you to effectively be in all of the client meetings for all of the projects that you have and running the front of that ship.
Yep. Yeah. It becomes so much. And some of us are more like, I don't know, okay with just running ourselves ragged on it. I am not. The older I get, I'm 31 now, and like the older I get, the more I'm like, I really want to just, and have a healthy business, but also just enjoy the lifestyle. Like I don't need to be like Gary Vee style hustling until I die, until I'm 50 years old. Like I'm very clear-eyed that I want that sweet spot where I can enjoy my day, but also have, a successful business. And even if that successful business is like, profitable and paying the bills, but not like multiple 8-figure, you know what I mean? Like there's a balance there. Like I will sacrifice like the multiple 8-figure for an enjoyable day and not having those 3 meetings. You know what I mean?
I completely agree with you. And I think that you touched on a really good point that I didn't realize until I'm in my 30s as well, until I got older too. When I'm in my 20s, you're like, yeah, let's grind it out. I want to work hard. I want to do great work. I can work these long days and these long hours. And then you get into your 30s and you're like, ease and flow. I want to enjoy life. I don't want to work as hard as I, once put in all of that time, energy, and effort. And I think that goes into also like where we are, different stages in life and what you want to see yourself as. And a lot of times if you're working so hard in your 20s, you're hoping that that's going to pay off and you can kind of relax or ease up at some time in your 30s or even maybe your 40s.
Yeah, totally. I completely experienced that once I crossed into 30. I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna reorganize the priorities here.
Yes.
Shanice, what are some red flags that indicate that an agency owner's processes are not defined well enough for them to start delegating?
So the biggest one is when you don't have any processes written down. So I've heard business owners, and sometimes you can probably pick up on it too, when they say, oh, the contractor can just pick it up as they go, or it's all in my head. All of those things are really code words for my processes aren't written down, or they're not fleshed out, or I don't have anything that I can say I do repeatedly, because I'm always trying to try the newest thing. And it kind of goes into the same with that last client that I told you about. They're always trying to do something new. So now you don't have this repeatable process that you can give someone else. So now the owner's finding himself in all of the meetings and trying to be everywhere at one time when you're only one person. But it is because those processes aren't written down. They're not fleshed out, and you're not sticking to the process long enough before you are trying to improve upon it. You have to, have some kind of standard. And to me, it's really not having your processes written down, like getting some IKEA furniture that really needs to be assembled. And we all know IKEA furniture has a million pieces, and there are no instructions included in that box with those million pieces. It just tells you put it together. And I know my furniture wouldn't really be put together correctly. I'm sure it would fall apart. It would be on backwards. And that's what I see with so many businesses. When you don't have those processes written down, you don't have instructions to put that furniture together, to tell that employee how to put your business together and your client work together, so that it's not falling apart, so that it's not on backwards, and that you're presenting the client with something that's of quality.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on the IKEA note, one thing that just needs to be said is there's always a missing piece. Always a missing piece. I don't know if I've ever built a piece of IKEA furniture and not had a missing nut or screw or bolt. And I'm like, oh, it says there's supposed to be 10. And I swear I only put in 9. And, anyways, which would you say are the key processes to define and streamline in a business?
So I would say that there are 3 key processes, and this is what I found over the years, that all businesses have these 3 things, which are marketing, sales, and client delivery work. And I actually have a free mini training just for your listeners that goes in depth on how to automate these key systems and processes in your digital marketing agency so that you can scale to 6, 7, and 8 figures. And
nice.
When I talk about
how do they get access to that?
Oh, they can get access to it. I also have a special page just for your viewers. They can go to tasklygroup.com/Tyler, and I'll probably mention it again at the end.
Perfect. Okay.
So I really say these 3 processes because they are the lifeline and the pulse of every business. Every business needs to have sales. They all need to have marketing, and they all have to deliver on that, what they sold. So those are my 3 keys. I actually had a client who had a web design agency, and the clients would reach out in the DMs or via email, and that person would either respond back slowly to the request that the potential client had, or the client would, since they responded back so slowly, the client would already hire someone else to do the job, or she would get on a call, tell them they'll send a proposal, but then would forget to send the proposal out afterwards. So you can see how that can amount to so much money and so much time missed, and so much money missed in potential clients. Those were $6,000 proposals that she was sending out and that she was missing out on because of forgetting to send those out. So streamlining the marketing, the sales, and the client onboarding process would have really prevented her from missing out on those particular clients.
Yeah, it's huge. I couldn't agree more on those 3 big buckets. What do you think, multi-million-dollar companies know about project management that maybe some of the smaller companies or startups don't yet?
So I've worked behind the scenes of a lot of 7- and 8-figure business owners, and they know that by setting up processes and automating them, you can spend less time on current client workload while still giving that same level of service. And I say this because I worked with one of my clients to set up an onboarding sequence template. and that they were at first doing all manually. But when you automate this process where after each time a client maybe signs their contract, they're automatically sent the email with the next steps in the process. They're told what to expect. They're given their client intake forms and any information that the client usually has to write in. Now that you've automated that process, instead of you having to be the one to go, okay, let me go ahead and write up this proposal. Let me send them that, write up that email and send that to them. That's saving up so much of your time. It's getting you out of the weeds, and it's letting you lead from the front, like we keep talking about and going back to. But it's so important that automated process just created so that you no longer have to do that manually.
Yeah, 100%. Onboarding, I think, is a crucial piece of the puzzle that needs to be streamlined and perfected, because when you're starting that client relationship, that is probably the most important and pivotal part of the entire client relationship that you'll have with them, is setting the right foundations, setting the right expectations. I've seen it too many times where, because an incorrect expectation was set at the beginning, maybe they, overpromised or, whatever they did in the beginning to misalign the expectations. What that can result in is, an agency doing a great job and still having an unhappy client because they were expecting them to be at a 20 and maybe they're at a 15, but maybe beating 10 was fantastic, right? But they didn't realize that beating 10 was fantastic. And so they're upset that they're at 15 because they were told possibly 20.
Yes.
Like all those little things that are just really, really important to set clear expectations and processes and what comes next and procedural things. It's so pivotal to the whole, client relationship and communication puzzle, that if it doesn't get right, if it's not streamlined, if it's not, put into a process, then you're just bound to have a really messy and chaotic organization.
Yes. And I had something to just add to that.
Absolutely.
It also helps your customers to feel really cared for when they have that onboarding sequence there. They know what to expect from you, as you mentioned, but they also aren't worried about, did I make the wrong decision with this company? Did I, did I choose? Because that's what's really going through customers' mind after, right before and after they sign the contract and they pay the invoice. They're like, did I make the right decision? That's how sometimes you can get some refund request or so, because they are worried. But if you have that onboarding sequence automated and it's given to them, they're told about exactly what to expect next. What do they need to do? They're like, oh, okay, this company is on it. I feel like they're going to really take care of me. They're going to provide me with everything that I need in a timely manner. And then they can rest assured that they made the right decision in choosing your company.
Yep. I totally agree that there's a lot of fear in big purchases when you're selling high ticket. So helping assuage those fears right as they come in can be a massive part of the puzzle. How can we manage projects more efficiently with less team meetings? I'm always someone who wants less team meetings. So I'm wondering, what you think about that.
Me too. I am not a big fan of meetings. I think the less meetings, the better. Maybe that's from us being in our 30s and wanting this flow and ease. We're like, too many meetings, too many distractions. But yes, I always say that a lot of times what I see is that companies will schedule meetings just so that we can chat about the progress of the project. So that we can see like, what's this person working on this week? What did we get done last week? What do we need to get done in the future? And if you have your processes really spelled out and you're uploading them into a project management tool and having that dashboard, you can look and see that at a glimpse. You can see what all of your employees are working on, what are the tasks for the week that need to get done, what's overdue, and what's coming up in the future, instead of having to rely on that weekly meeting where maybe someone's distracted, or maybe they could use that meeting time to actually do the client work. But instead they're having to prepare mentally, I'll say, because it's not necessarily they need to come with anything, but it's like now you have to stop what you're doing. You have to make sure that you're crafting some time, a buffer between, a buffer after, to get ready to go to that new meeting. Versus if you just saw it at a glance, then you could see like, okay, what employees are stuck? Maybe I can reach out to them one-on-one to give them that attention, to maybe give them more training, to update our processes, our systems, to add additional checklists or something like that, so that the next person who does this same thing won't have those same concerns. And I'm a big advocate in documentation anyways, because then you can see, versus like having something verbal, people can misinterpret. There's all sorts of things. You can forget what was said, but if you have it written down on paper, you can just reference that same sheet or that project management tool or that dashboard. And you can say, hey, we had you scheduled for this. You wrote in the comments that you're going to do it by this day. Do you need some help? I see that you're stuck here.
Yep. Yeah. I love that. Having, a good project management tool that you can just log in and see what was the last thing that happened on this account? What is the next thing coming up? What are we overdue for? Those are all, critical things. How can processes help us to optimize quality assurance, even when, some agencies have a very small team?
So processes can help us really prevent errors, and that is really big in ensuring quality. One of the things that I saw was, because I help to strategize and sometimes redo or add input to some of the processes that agency owners will go through. And so in looking through some of their project management tools, I would notice that they didn't have that checkpoint into their process or into their steps of having someone to check it afterwards. So usually you do have like a quality assurance person, or if that's still the web design person or graphic designer, they still need to do that quality assurance step. But when you don't have that step, that's when it can be overlooked. And so in one particular instance, it was something with data that was being done at this particular agency for a client. And they were uploading it into, I'm about to get really technical, but they were uploading it into a sandbox. And it was like a testing environment for the client to kind of view. And so the client's like, okay, we're ready to go live. That means that we're ready for you to put this onto our platform and to have it go, to make it active so that anybody who goes to our website can see it. So they said, okay. And in their processes, they had all the steps out for putting it live, putting it into their platform, but they forgot to, turn something on. They forgot to have that quality assurance, to have someone before they told the client, okay, this is all ready. So now the client's coming back to them saying, this, we're missing these parts. We're missing this. We don't see it live. And it's because they didn't have that person to go back and check all of the work that one person did. So even if, you are a small agency, you can still have someone, or maybe if it's just a small team, or you might have someone who manages over everything, that person might be the one to check and make sure that this environment's live and it has these criteria. And you have to incorporate that into your project plans and into the processes and schedules that you have. But it really helps prevent those big errors like that, because you don't want to have to keep going back and forth to a client. And I'm sure you've worked with designers or even web designers where you're telling them like, hey, I want my page to look like this. And they're like, okay, we did it. And then you're just like, no, I told you these steps. I want it to look like this. And then you go back and they go, I did it. And you're like, okay, we're still missing these 3 steps. And that's really frustrating for a client. You want those great reviews. You want raving clients, and you want to do good work, and having to keep going back and telling that client like, okay, we did it, but it's like a little bit more complete, but incomplete. That's just a bad look on your particular business.
Yeah, I completely agree. Trying to cut down on going back, especially when the client has already said, I want A, B, C, and D.
Yes.
And if you only come back with A and B, it's a big misstep, and it can cause a lot of frustration with the client. And so having, your process in place to where, your quality checking, did we get A, B, C, and D in the final product before it's just rush delivered, is absolutely critical across the board. So I couldn't agree more with you there. So how can we spend less time on our current client workload while giving the same level of high quality service. So I think it's kind of something everyone wants to know. How can I deliver super high quality, but work less time overall?
Yeah, so I would say, and maybe I'm just biased, but the processes and automating them, you can really spend less time on the client workload. And I know we talked about that onboarding sequence before, and we also, mentioned and discussed about hiring and how automating some of those processes can do that. But, just little things like having touch points, automating those emails where you're reaching out to someone, having those templates of emails already written out, that can help you from reinventing the wheel, having to think and strategize on, oh, what do I put on the email this time? Now you have a template that tells you, okay, all I have to do is add in a couple of these blanks and I already have something prepared, and I can just tailor it, has something to go off of. I know I've personally spent like 3 hours, 2 hours just trying to think about, okay, what would be the perfect thing to say in an email? But once you get that perfect thing to say, now you can just reproduce it for each person and tailor it towards them instead of spending 3 hours each time trying to think of the perfect thing or the perfect way that you can say it. And so that really helps.
Email templates save the world. I totally agree. I could not agree more. I have tons of email templates for all types of, different things that happen, recurringly.
Yes. And there are just so many different automations as well that you can add in, besides just emails. That's a big part of all our time, but you can also add in automations for assigning people to tasks, because I would see so often, certain tasks might stay in the queue. So sometimes, like say this podcast, you might have like recorded it and now it's waiting for the editor. Now instead of you having to notify the editor in a project management tool, you can just move that over to the editor's duties and it will automatically notify them. And you would have your notes, you would upload everything that they need. And that's a repeatable process you can do over and over again. It's the same where like after the editor is finished, you might want to send this to the marketing department for the marketing to kind of put a post onto your Instagram stories or to any of your things. And you need those systems to talk to each other. You need that person to be notified without you having to keep changing up and uploading that person's name, kind of keep alerting them or adding them, because that's a feature that we're all used to as well. Or even changing a bunch of dates. All of those things take up time. But if you have something in a sequence that's automated in place and you can just mark it complete and it goes to the next person and the next person's assigned, they have all the details of what they need to have to do on this. That frees up on average just 20 hours of your time each week with those templates, with already notifying people, just by preventing you from having to do those redundant manual tasks and replacing them with those automations.
Totally. Can project management tools replace the need for hiring a high level project manager? Are we at that stage yet in the tools?
I believe so, if you're using and setting it up correctly. So what I see is that many times a high level project manager is making sure that the project is being completed on time and on budget, and they're responding directly to the client, kind of like a middleman. Yeah. But with the dashboards, you can get that same visibility. You can use some automations. You can use email integration into the project management tool, and that can create certain tasks so that you don't miss responding to emails. So the emails are automatically incorporated into certain tasks. You know what needs to be responded to. You can send emails out automatically through the project management tool as well, and you won't miss a beat. So if you're sending, say, like a weekly email update to the client to inform them of the project's process, then that's something that can be automated. Instead of a project manager having to do, you have that template, and the person who just completed that portion, they might fill out certain areas of like, oh, okay, we've just finished this portion in the project. This portion's next. Have a great weekend. Something simple like that where, and sometimes, I guess, depending on how many projects you're trying to manage or trying to have under one person to do, that can also, I think it just depends on the business model, how they have it structured. But for the most part, I do think that you can use more specialty work, and then have those automations in there to replace a high level PM, versus having just a high level PM to try and manage a bunch of different projects at once.
Yeah, definitely. At a bare minimum, a good project management tool can take a lot of the workload off of a manual person running around trying to do all these tasks. How can we best organize our onboarding templates, trainings, SOPs, our project management? How do we best organize all that?
So that's actually a very loaded question, Tyler. I actually use this 3D method that I have. It's where you define, design, and you do. It's my special framework that I made to tackle this for the customer's journey. So I organize the onboarding templates, the training, the project management, all of that by first defining the specific goal and the purpose that I have for organizing this. I'm really trying to get to the bottom of what are you trying to accomplish? What's the goal for doing this, for organizing this, or for having this process? And then I would take that idea in mind, keeping that goal in mind, and I would start to design, create the steps and the processes needed to reach that defined goal. So we would really map out, okay, what's step 1, step 2, step 3, and sometimes goals have to be broken up into smaller pieces so that we can really make sure that we are creating and doing things in a specific way so that it can all measure up together. And then lastly, we do, which is where we implement or upload the tasks into a software or tool. And that really allows us to automate and assign tasks. And it's a pretty detailed process, but it's also my zone of genius. And that's what I help clients with the most.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the breaking up bigger goals into smaller steps. I think just the way human nature is, if you see something on your list that is just huge, it's like, okay, let's look for the smaller things that we can knock off quicker. But if you take something off of your list that's huge and you put on, maybe 5 things that are smaller, that are just more attainable, then I don't know, at least for me, my brain just can tackle that a lot easier. It's like, okay, if I just do X, Y, and Z, I've been productive today in moving that much closer to X big goal. But if I just see X big goal and I'm like, okay, what could be something that I could do to work on for it that's not defined, like you said, it can get, pushed back. It's where procrastination starts up. And that's when you start slipping away from really, achieving those bigger goals.
Yes. And I do the same each day. I map out 3 main things that I want to get accomplished. And they are something that's easy to digest, something that I can do fairly quickly. But at least I know if I did those 3 things, I feel accomplished and I feel like I've moved forward. Sometimes, and like you said, when we have this really big goal, then we start having that paralysis analysis. We're stopping from being productive or making those steps forward that will really propel us. Like say if our goal was, I want a 7-figure business. Well, how do you get there? You have this big goal and there are no steps in between because you're just trying to jump from step 0 to step 20. But there are other little steps that you get there. Like maybe first you might say, I have to get to a 6-figure business before I can get to a 7 or 8-figure business. And then what are the steps to get to a 6-figure business? Oh, I need to get clients. So let's break that into a smaller piece of, okay, well, how do I get clients? Let's talk about the marketing. What am I going to do to market? Am I going to post on social media? Am I going to run some ads? Am I going to do joint ventures with people? Am I going to do outreach? Because each of those goals have different processes for them. So yes, definitely breaking it up can help you feel more and help you to accomplish more rather than just trying to have that whole bite of that one big process.
Yeah, totally. And, people don't realize, like, people that have achieved these things that we want to achieve and have met these big goals in the 7-figure business or whatever the big goal at the end of the day is, oftentimes those people go out there and they talk about their successes and they talk about their wins, and they don't talk about kind of like what we're talking about right now, that it wasn't just like, I started out and then boom, now I'm here. Like, there was so many little tiny steps along the way to get there that, you may not have seen, step 10 when you're at step 2, but you can see in the distance 3 and 4 once you get done with 2. And so it's just kind of it's always taking that next step. What is the very next thing, and having that very next thing on your actual to-do list, and just staying laser focused on that, you know, and then one day you look up and you're like, oh my God, you know, I'm here, I'm at step 10, right? But you weren't, you know, just sitting there thinking about step 10 all the way through from 1 all the way to 10. You were just looking at exactly what you have to do and then the next step. And if you just stay laser focused on your current step and the one right ahead of that, you're going to get to 10 way faster than if you just try to, you know, scramble all the way up there.
I completely agree. No one is that overnight success like we all would think that we are. No one just blew up. Even the people who seem like, oh, it only took them a year, but it was like a year of intensity, a year of focus, and a year of learning, trying to just figure out what worked, what didn't work, learning, you know, what are the steps I need, in testing. That's the biggest thing, learning and testing.
Yeah. And it's years of like I said, like
practice,
managing the task at hand, and managing the thing that you're currently working on, and not just, you know, fantasizing about step 10. You got to get through 2, 3, and 4, and 5 all the way up.
But it feels so nice to fantasize about step 10, being at the finish line, bypassing all of the grunt work.
Yeah, it does. It does. I've learned over time that if you're constantly thinking about 10 and not really what you're at, what task at hand, it takes so much longer to get there. The fastest I've ever got to these big goals always happens when I just keep my head down and I'm focused on the current thing that's going to take me to the next step. And like you said, you break down those goals into tiny, smaller ones, right? Like if the goal is 100K months, you first, okay, I want to get to 5K. I want to get to 5K a month, right? And what is 5K a month? You know, do you look at your packages? If you sell $2,500 packages, okay, sell 2. So how do I sell 2 this month? And just keeping your head down and making sure you get 2 that month. And then you look up one day and you're like, okay, wow, I got my 5. Mm-hmm. All right, now how do I double that? How can I increase these, you know, duplicate these processes and grow? And when you do that, you look up one day and you're like, oh my God, I'm at 10. And that it went way faster than just, you know, I guess not getting so granular and laser focused on the processes. Like it goes by way quicker in that way, at least in my own experience.
Yeah, no, I experienced pretty much the same thing. And, you know, not being stuck on just the step 10, but, you know, focusing on some of those smaller steps that will add up and get you to that step 10.
And get all the gears turning and get everything. And that's how you start building momentum. It's just those little tiny steps right in front of you, one after another.
Yeah, but it's like always how in the world do I, like the chicken or egg, do I hire someone? And that's why I love how your program talks about, you know, using contractors so that you can that's really what stood out the most to me, using those contractors so that you're not having to worry about salaries and things like that. I've seen so many people get bogged down in those details of like, okay, well, what do I need to do first? Do I need to hire a copywriter, or do I need to hire a web designer? I need to hire someone first, or I need to have these people lined up before I can make any sales? But now you have people waiting. So like you said.
Yeah. And that doesn't work at all. Like one of the biggest, you know, cheat codes or shortcuts that, you know, I uncovered in launching a digital agency, and it's a main pillar of the Done For You agency program, is connecting with a valuable network of digital marketing contractors that are ready to go from day one, that have case studies that you can use to bolster your marketing with, even if you don't have the experience yourself, that, you know, will enable you to bring on a client, hand them over for fulfillment, take your piece of the profit, manage them, and continue moving, instead of getting stuck in the fulfillment, trying to learn how to do it yourself, trying to scramble to find that person. Then, like, step 1 is meet the contractors, find out who's going to be building your websites, find out who's going to be running your ads, find out who's going to be, you know, delivering your copy, right? And so when you land that first deal, when you land that second deal, you know exactly who to go to. You've already talked to them. You know their prices. That's how you created your prices. Mm-hmm. That's how you know how much margin you have. And so the whole thing, you know, works that way when, you know, whereas, you know, if you didn't do that, if you didn't, you know, join a program like mine, or go out there and find your own contractors and put that network in, then when you do land that client,
what do I do next?
It's a brief moment of victory. Yeah, it is. It's so exciting. It's like, oh my God, yay. And then, oh no. And what I think is so funny is like in some of the big online Facebook groups, you'll see people like that in like the digital marketing groups. They're like, oh my God, I just closed my first $10,000 deal. I'm so excited.
Now what do I do next?
I need a website. I need a website designer and Facebook ads. Does anybody know somebody? And like, oh my God, that like, you're going to end up, with the first person or the first few people that come to you. And who knows if they're any good, who knows if their pricing aligns with the pricing that you pitched, like if that can fit inside of it. Like it alleviates a lot of problems when you build out your contracting team first, and you don't have to pay any money up front for them. The clients pay for them. So it's just, it makes a whole lot more sense to do it that way.
I really, really like that you do that. And that's a different spin on it than I've seen other people in the industry do.
Yeah. Yeah. How can we save both time and money by putting our project management on autopilot?
Yeah. So I've actually seen businesses flush $10,000, $5,000, $3,000 just or more, sometimes just down the drain because they didn't have that project management on autopilot. And I actually experienced this myself. I remember reaching out to 3 different businesses for services, and after doing the sales calls, after being promised that they'll send a proposal, only one of the companies actually followed up and sent me the proposal within 24 hours. And that actually was the company that I chose, that I ended up going with to do those services. And so that's one of the main things. I can always tell when a company doesn't have their project management on autopilot because they're usually sending proposals manually. They'll tend to forget to send the proposals. They'll forget to respond to certain DMs. And this is really how you lose potential customers and waste time on sales calls and, just not really closing the deal. You're getting everything in line, but I don't know if you're so stressed out or you don't have those things in place. You don't know how, or you don't have the skill to, or you're just, in that analysis paralysis phase. But that's really how I see that autopilot can make sure. And it's the same thing when we talked about a little bit earlier with making sure that your client feels well and they're onboarded correctly. If they're not onboarded correctly, then they're going to feel like, oh, this person, I'm just another number to them. Let me go ahead and cancel the contract before I begin, because now I'm thinking that they're not going to take care of me. If they're not organized now and they can't fulfill these small promises that they had, how can I be sure that they're going to fill the big promise of my project?
Yeah, that's huge. I think about, just in my own agency and the processes that we have in sales, like, just one example of what you're talking about is when a no-show happens. So when I hire, new closers, so we train them on how to manage these situations. Like we, expect that they come with some level of sales training, but we also want to give them, resources, training, SOP. And like we have, a no-show email. If someone doesn't show up to their sales meeting, we send them a templated email. We send them a templated text. And the goals of that email and text is to re-educate them about what we do and get them back on the call. Right. And so these things are just, baseline processes that help feed the business and recoup money that we could be possibly losing, and then also assist the closers in what they're doing as a foundational, reach out to the customer in a no-show situation, first and foremost, and then the closer themselves then does their manual outreach. And so, you have the reminder emails, you have the no-show emails, you have the follow-up texts, you have the closer reaching out. So all that combined together is what, the business, does in its entirety. But as a baseline, having those, automated pieces of it really helps, just create a foundation across the board.
And different tools can actually set that up so that you're not doing that manually. So if you have that if then statement, like if the person shows up for the call, then they can go through this sequence. If they did not show up for the call, then they would go through a different sequence and they would get, those reminders, or like you said, that was a great thing, having that reminder text in there. So can be an automated thing where if the person you've been waiting for a minute or two for the person to come on, you're shooting them a text and they're like, oh, let me get on really quickly. Instead of you sitting there and wasting that 30 minutes or an hour that you have crafted out, now you've reminded that person to get on there. So that's a really good thing. And sometimes people just don't think to do that, or they forget to.
Yeah, it's huge. It's really big. Anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? I have one more question for you. I ask every guest that comes on my show one last question. So let's do that one first, and then I'll give you you the last word, and let us, all of our listeners know where they can catch up with you as well. So my last question for you is, what is your number one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is just launching their agency right now?
Oh, I have so many pieces of advice for that one.
Pick the most important.
I would say start documenting those systems now, and those processes in place, even if you are just a agency of one. Because what you can do is, if you're having it set up and you're actually you're the prototype, you're testing those processes to see if it's really clear for someone else to go in and to follow those same things. And that way, when it comes for you to bring on someone else, you already have something in place, and you're not scrambling to try to create training materials, or you're not scrambling to try to put it all together so you have something for that person to do.
Yeah. And I would add this to that is, when we talk about on this episode, document your processes and get your, SOPs, standard operating procedures together and everything. I know for a lot of people and a lot of like brand new agency owners or people new to the business space, it can seem overwhelming, but really it's not. Just even, I have a 7-figure agency, and the way we document our processes, the way I document my processes for new members is Loom. Loom is a screen recording software. It's free, or it's $10 a month, I believe, for the pro version. Like, it's very, very affordable. It's a Chrome plugin. If you're not using Chrome, you should be using Chrome, but it's a Chrome plugin, and you just click it and it records your whole screen or just your window. And honestly, it can be as simple as just talking over your process. And that's generally how I start with our SOPs is, I'll find myself doing, a repetitive task, and it says, okay, I want to give this to my VA or my assistant, or I want to give this to our project manager or our account manager, so that they can start doing it. And I'll hit record, and I'll say, okay, hello everybody. Because you want to give a greeting, because they may be making it for Amy, but Amy is going to pass that video down to somebody else when she leaves, or she's going to create her own if the process changes, right? So I just kind of hit record, say, hey, this is what we're going to do for this process, and this is exactly how I do it, and then I'll just go through the process and I'll narrate what I'm doing. So then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look in column J, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find that there's nothing there. So I need to go see if there's a payment really there. So I'm going to log over here into our merchant system. I'm going to go see if there's a payment, and you're just narrating what you're doing over a video. And it really is that simple. It doesn't have to be, super complex. I think the next step would be having, a Google Doc where you have steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are written out. But you could start very easily by just recording what you're doing and doing the process yourself, and then setting that video off, and then, maybe making a 10-step or 20-step, whatever it is, line item for that process, right? And then just passing that over, keeping those all in your project management tool for easy reference in the Rolodex of how do I do this? And it just makes it a lot more simple. So don't get overwhelmed when you hear us talking about documenting processes and where do I start. It starts by just doing the process, recording it, and narrating it and speaking over it. So it doesn't have to be.
And I agree 100% with what you just said, that definitely doing those videos, doing a quick screen recording, something that's 3 minutes or 5 minutes long. It does not have to be long to tell someone how to do a process. Sometimes we overthink things so much, and we get stuck because we're trying to think about how to do this perfectly. But just making sure that you're communicating effectively, showing that screen of what exactly you're doing so that the person can follow through and even, do the same thing that you did. They can copy it right from the screen, pushing pause, playing, and able to see it a lot better and easier. And then it doesn't take up a lot of your time. Now you have SOPs in 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Shanice, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners that they may need to know, to catch up with you, or that, that may help them, with their day-to-day business?
Yeah. So any of your listeners, if they want to get that 3 steps to automate systems in your agency business to scale to 6, 7, and 8 figures, they can go ahead over to tasklygroup.com/Tyler, Tyler. They can also book a call with me, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. All of those links are on that same page, tasklygroup.com/Tyler.
Woohoo! Shanice, thank you so much for joining us here today. I think not only our listeners learned a lot, but I did too. And when I learn a lot, I know that it's always a great episode. So again, thank you so much for hopping on.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed our chat.